So there won't be much by way of.
I drug out my old one.
How many of you in the 50s, remember the 50s? And nobody knew a communist. Well, that's sort of interesting, isn't it? Because they got so much attention. When I was in the early 50s, late 40s, when the McCarthy era started, I was delivering newspapers from our home on the South Hill of Spokane. And every morning we'd go to get some newspapers off the corner and then go to deliver them to the houses. And one morning, the front page of the newspaper showed a picture of one of the couples that was on my roof. And they were people that I loved dearly. They were wonderful to me. They would feed me when I go to deliver the paper. You know, at Christmas time, they'd give me a big tip and stuff like that. But here they were, it was revealed, they were communists. Now, I had been indoctrinated at that time. That was the time when we were all being indoctrinated that to be a commie was to be dangerous, you know. These people I knew were not dangerous. They were sweet, they were kind. So I was really confused. And I learned a lot then too. So I went, and next time I visited them, I asked them about it, and they kind of laughed and told me the story of how that had happened. So this tonight I'm writing something for Gene and Clay for the Times that shows a picture of communists in Pioneer Snow, in Occidental Park, you know where that is, in what was called Skid Road, demonstrating, and they have signs. And one of the signs is, get people to stop persecuting the communists. In other words, us. And I said, damn right, that was just really bad business. So there you go, you know, I'm kind of a commie sympathizer. Thank you very much. Now, I was hoping some of you might be commie sympathizers too. We could get together afterwards, and I brought a little box. I brought a little book with me. It's in the car. I don't have it with me, but it's the book. It's Marx. We could read from Marx together. So nobody knew a communist, huh? No one knew a communist?
I knew a communist.
Okay. What do you want to tell us about the communist?
He was an organizer, you know. He was in New York City, the organizer for the unions.
Oh, wonderful.
And he was communist, and he was also a socialist. And so he really, he was an old guy by the time I knew him. He was in the 70s.
Yeah.
And he had worked hard for the union movement, and he was still pretty left-wing when I met him. A wonderful guy, I think, stood all for the right things and for the people, and he fought for the common working man and woman.
Yes. Since that couple, I never met a communist I didn't like. I mean, I didn't have a party, but I liked everyone I've ever met. I had a communist girlfriend for a while, too. I liked her. Let me put that down for a second. So, sorry you guys didn't have communist friends. That's a shame. Could have made you better people, maybe. A lot of those communists were like myself, who wasn't a communist. I didn't take any particular interest in what do you call that place? Doctrine? No, I can't remember. Dogma or something like that. But it's really good if you've ever read any Marx later on. It's quite interesting. Well, you guys can ask questions before the show if you like. Questions, anybody?
So which one of you guys is the photographer?
We're all photographers, but he's the one now who's got the reputation. Because he has the more expensive gear.
You know, essentially,
He's really good at it too.
there's a kind of a funny story. When Paul and I started together, this is now about 17 years ago, we did a book called Washington Then and Now. And the first picture I took was with a little digital camera. I just bought my first little Canon digital camera, those little square boxes. And it was maybe 2002, and I went down to Husky Stadium. And I had a special pass to go back and take a picture repeating a classic picture from 1920 of Husky Stadium before it is what it is today. And so I was up in the press booth, and I pulled out my little square camera. It was about this big. It looked like a little Kodak. And all of the pros laughed at me. They looked at me and pointed and said, "Look at that! Look at this guy! What's he think he's doing?" Because everybody there was outfitted. It was TV crew, and there were the guys with the big cameras. And I realized there were limitations on this little automatic camera. But I realized that it actually, that to be able to walk into places and not be challenged, it's handy to have a big piece of gear. It doesn't have to be.
The longer the lens, the better.
The longer the lens, the better. It just gives you a sense. There you go. It gives you a sense of.
It's very male.
But more than that, post 9/11, if you show up with a big camera, the assumption is that you're doing a job. And if you show up with something small, very often people challenge you, and they're when we were shooting the book from I think 2004 or 5, 6, we were shooting Washington Then and Now, and I'd say 4 or 5 times I had security guards come up and say, "What gives you the right to stand in the middle of the street?"
Then he'd reach for the big camera inside his pocket.
And I'd show him the big camera and say, "This gives me the."
I thought you were reaching for the Constitution and the Bill of Rights.
They had never read the Constitution. But there were several experiences where, yes,
This little thing,
it's
I
marvelous.
haven't used a real camera since 2001 or 2.
Yeah.
I know an awful lot of photographers who, for everything but the shots where they have to have a big camera, a lot of us just use this.
Did anybody bring the donuts tonight? No?
We have a good donut bakery here in Redmond, too.
What's that?
We have a good donut bakery in Redmond, Sunrise Donuts.
Yes.
The best. Hi. Welcome. My name's Jill Morrison. I'm the Adult Services Librarian at... Hi. Oops.
It's on.
Yeah. Hi, I'm the Adult Services Librarian here at Redmond Library. Welcome for coming. It's great. Anybody never been to a library program before? Everybody's been before. Oh, great. We just count to get a feel for, what programs work to get people in the door. So that's great. I'm going to turn it over to Margaret. She's going to give us the rundown of the Historical Society. And enjoy your evening.
What's the music?
What is the music?
I don't think we should have the music on, frankly.
Right, you know what it is.
What is it?
It's our introduction.
Oh, it's part of your program.
It's part of our
Oh
program.
my gosh.
Get with the program.
Get on the program, no kidding.
So,
Come on, let's sing along. Go ahead, sorry.
thank you, Jill.
That's all right.
Thank you. My name is Margaret Zabisky. I am the program chair for this evening for the Redmond Historical Society. And no, you don't have to, there won't be a quiz on how to spell my last name, so don't worry about it. It's so exciting to see all of you here this evening. This is the second season of the Evening Speakers series here at the library. And we would like to thank Jill Morrison and Dan Schaefer and the Friends of the Redmond Library for their support for these series. And if you like what you hear and see, Tonight, we hope that you will come to the Saturday speaker series, Saturday mornings. It's also from the Redmond Historical Society. You can get a bookmark with information there at the back of the room. It has information about the Saturday speaker series. And let's get started with this evening. You are in for a treat, as you well know, with our guests Paul Dorpat and Jean Sherrard.
And Clay Eals.
And Clay Eals. We know them from this book, Seattle Now and Then, The Historic 100, but they have amazing resumes on their own.
Clay wrote the introduction.
Paul is the founder and editor-in-chief of Helix, the first underground newspaper in the Northwest. He is also a concert promoter and responsible for creating Sky River, the first multi-day outdoor rock festival on the planet. And he did that 1 year before
I don't
Woodstock.
think so. But it could be, it could have been.
Oh well, go with it. But then in the late 70s, he became interested in Northwest history, and by 1982, he had started the long-running Seattle Times column, Seattle Now and Then.
And Clay will tell you how long that ran. Clay?
It's more than 37 years, 1,800 columns, starting in 1982.
And that we can still enjoy that in the Pacific Northwest magazine.
And Clay is now one of the writers for that column, as is Jean, and me occasionally.
Jean Sherrard is a writer, a photographer, a theater worker, and a teacher. He previously served as artistic director of the Globe Radio Repertory, which adapted and aired literary classics on National Public Radio's NPR Playhouse. But for several decades now, he has worked with Paul. And their efforts have included the book Washington Then and Now, and an award-winning KCTS video, History of Bumbershoot. Most recently, they've collaborated on Seattle Now and Then, The Historic 100, and that's a compilation of their favorite columns from the past 37 years.
With a title by Clay Eals.
Gotta love those editors.
Editors, yeah.
So I just have a personal note on this. I am not a Puget Sound native. I came here 22 years ago this month.
Oh, wow.
And one of my first really good experiences of Seattle was on a beautiful golden Sunday morning going to Tower Records in Queen Anne, buying a Seattle Times, and finding this amazing column in the magazine section with these photos. And so it really is a thrill to introduce our speakers,
You're very kind. You're
Paul
very
Dorpat
kind.
and Jean Sherrard.
You're gonna have to pick up your mic.
I think many of us here want to really know, how do you spell your last name? Go ahead.
Well, now there will be a quiz on this. It's Z or Z.
This is great. I can just set it right.
I-V-I-S-K-I.
Wow.
It's
Exotic.
very easy.
Yeah.
It is exotic.
It's easy but exotic. Yeah. Is that part of the program?
There's a couple interpretations to that, what you just said, easy but exotic.
Yeah, okay. I don't get it. All right then. Jean's going to take over now, and this is you need to, you can move that, Jean.
Okay, I'm just trying to get it so you can see it.
Yeah, that's fine. I know it by heart, Jean, that's all right. Do you? I think so.
Okay.
There we go. So how many of you have bought this book previously before coming tonight? So we expect all of you to buy it tonight then. And we want you to buy copies for your relatives in Peoria. Peoria, yeah. Do you have relatives in Peoria?
Illinois.
Yeah.
Illinois, yeah.
Or some communists, maybe. All right, see.
I think that's good.
Thank you.
Oops.
This guy was young when we started, you know, he was young. He had a couple of kids that were this big. Now they're way big like him.
Yeah, they are. Okay. There we go. So welcome. We've been, last year, this book arrived. We expected it to arrive last October, and we'd finished it in the summer of 2018 and sent it off to be printed. And we discovered that when you're involved in a trade war with the country that prints your book, sometimes they can delay the shipment of the printing. So the book didn't arrive until the beginning of December last year. So we're out on the hustings again, and it actually, we celebrated it hadn't arrived yet. I think we had 100 copies, and we celebrated their arrival, which just before Paul's 80th birthday, which is October 28th, coming up 81. So we are...
God, it's this month.
It is this month.
Oh, God.
So, as Margaret said, we've been doing this, Paul's been doing this since 1982. And we chose 100 subjects, which I spent a couple years running around and reshooting. So all the photos of these subjects are modern photos, and then adapted the text to match the changes. Now, as you know, there have been a few changes in our cityscape over the last year. So we're already seeing things that are nows that are now thens. So we'll be looking at a couple of them tonight, but we'll also try to tell you a few stories. We're going to start right up with the very first column that Paul wrote for the Times in 1982. And this one, let's see. The date of this is March 12th, 1919. And it's the 63rd Artillery who's just arrived back in town, the local boys coming back from the First World War. So they had a huge celebration, and and filled the streets and to welcome these guys home. Well, my job has been over the last, since Paul and I have been working together for, I think I've been doing the column since 2006, 2007. And my job is to find some kind of comparable modern equivalent. And so for this particular shot, I found myself on January 22nd, 2017, downtown at this corner. And this was the Women's March going down 4th Avenue. We're at 4th and Pike. And of course, that's Westlake up above, right there. And we're going to take a quick look now. And that's the very first photo that Paul took for the column for the Times.
I think she gave me that person there holding the historical photo sold coffee right there at the corner. And she either gave me a cup or I bought a cup. Can't remember that. Now we want to introduce you to interrupt us and ask questions. We'd like to, liven it up with your compliments. We like compliments.
Seriously, if you have any questions, just shout them out.
That's 70s, that picture?
This picture was taken probably in the fall of 81.
81.
Because you can still see that people they don't look like they're dressed for winter, but it didn't run until January of 82. But this is the very first column that launched Paul's 37 plus years in 1,800 columns.
I think this was one of several shots I took to finalize the decision by the Times to have me do it. So I went and took them examples, and this was one of them, I think. Yeah.
Had you worked at the Times before?
No, I had never worked at the Times before. No. Why, did you work there?
I delivered it probably.
You did, yeah.
Now I'm 85, so I'm your elder.
You're my elder, I respect you for that.
You have more beard than I have.
Uh-huh. You look marvelous. Look at you're so fit. and I'm an obese slob. I really apologize for that. I hope I don't want to bring down your credibility because you are beautiful. Well, you got the compliment. There you
What was
go.
that interesting building?
What's that?
What was that interesting building? It looks like triangle.
Ooh, this triangle up here. Well, that stands where it's where Westlake now is a park. But what was that building, Paul?
It had several names. It was during the Prohibition. It was the basement was they sold beer there without permission. It had several names through its life, and it's triangular. Is that corner there? It's true that I can't think of any of the names at this moment, but that's because I'm 80. That's not because I didn't know the name 8 years ago. I did, I knew them all, but I'm losing it. So you have to just stay with Gene tonight.
Well, let's go back to an 80 here.
Yeah.
This is 1880,
Yeah.
and it's Governor Elijah P. Ferry had just delivered his end of 1879 State of the Territory address. And in that address, he mentioned that the Northwest is known for its particularly mild weather. This was published on Sunday, January 4th in 1880. And on that same day, the snow began to fall. And for the next week, for 8 days, the snow fell, and it broke all records up to that point, and up to now, it snowed 64 inches. So here we are looking up First and Cherry, and tell us about some of these buildings, Paul. First, the one on
The one on the right is Yestler's Hall, where many of the different local events, like lectures and weddings and a variety within church, use that hall. And it was torn down a little bit before the fire would have destroyed it. The fire did not destroy it, it was torn down. That is 1889, the big fire in the city. And then the building behind it was the sheriff's home behind it, McGraw. And the building behind it with the steeple is the Baptist church at 4th and Cherry, where the city hall is now. And the houses on the left, I know those in particular, but I'm going to repress my showing off. Okay?
Well, let's look at it today. And unfortunately, over the last several years, I attest that it's very difficult to find deep snow at First and Cherry. But I did find some in 2018 in the spring.
Efforts too. Go ahead, Gene. Show them your snow.
So there's the snow, and I want to call attention. This is about 7:30 in the morning. The snow had already melted from the night before, but there is a little stack on top of that fire hydrant.
Tells you something about fire hydrants, doesn't it? Clay, where are we here?
Well, this photo was taken in downtown Seattle, looking back towards the waterfront by a Norwegian photographer named Anders Vilse, who was, this is late 98, 99, and it's kind of a marvelous waterfront photo. Now, this little building here, whoops, let's go back. This little, we gotta go back, sorry. We're headed back. Okay,
He doesn't have control of his instrument, does he?
This little structure here, they made ice in this building until, according to Paul's original column, until around 1980. This was a building that for nearly 100 years made ice. And so once that was torn down, we're now looking, we're at the waterfront. This is Railroad Avenue, and we're going to look at it today. You've got a sneak peek of it, but we are standing right about, there's the waterfront fountain.
Who are those kids, Gene?
No, those are the kids I teach. They're some middle school kids in the school that I teach drama at. But behind them, you can see something that has disappeared very, very recently. Later in the show, I will show you the very last segment of the viaduct in the southern part. There's still a little bit left, far gone. But it's gone. And actually, I was talking to former Mayor Greg Nichols a few weeks ago, and he said, you know, what's interesting about the viaduct is that it was a 65-year placeholder. If we had not had it there, this entire waterfront area would have been filled up in ways that we would not appreciate today. But now we have a chance. Who knows if we'll take it? But we have a chance to build it and think of it afresh. One thing that's amazing about it to me is when I'm standing on the waterfront, there's no sound of trucks, there's no squeal of brakes, there's no clatter overhead. You can actually have a conversation with someone who's walking next to you. So that's one of the kind of miracles of an open waterfront now.
Doesn't smell as much either.
It doesn't, that's true.
All the propane, the carbon, yeah.
Well, this is another Anders Vilse photograph. He was a Norwegian who came to town and shot pictures for the railroad and ended up downtown shooting some classic photos. This one in particular is a kind of a marvel. Here's you probably can't see this from afar, but it reads, aluminum houses for sale, portable. They only weighed 150 pounds, and this was for transport to the Yukon. And so you imagine the Charlie Chaplin Gold Rush movie when all the guys are hiking up the mountain. Well, they're carrying this 150-pound aluminum refrigerator on their back.
I wonder how many.
I don't know.
I bet not many. That's crazy.
I think it's crazy, but the Iron Man of the Hoe.
Well, if they were just going up to the waterfront somewhere, then it makes sense to take it maybe.
Yeah. Well, here's that location today. Another area, they just literally 2 weeks ago, they took down the Marion Street pedestrian overpass, and that's been replaced by Columbia Street overpass. So that's gone, and the main ferry building, this has just been boarded up and shut down, and everything is moved to the south in a pretty clever fashion.
Where are they? There's no ferry building there anymore?
This building with the subway is closed now. It's been the Coleman Dock ferry building.
Where do the ferries go?
They go just to the south, to the dock. They line up on the docks just to the south.
Is that a new building then?
Yeah, brand
So many changes.
Well, Vilse went back to Norway and ended up becoming sort of the Ansel Adams, the Edward Curtis of Norway. He took pictures of folk events and glorious landscapes, and in 2015, Norway actually released a series of stamps with many of his photos on them and celebrated his work. But we had him for a few years before he went back and became Norway's great photographer.
His wife tricked him. His wife went before him to go visit the relatives. And once she got there and he showed up, she said, I'm not going back to Washington State. You're going to stay here or you're going to leave me. So she tricked him and she won. And he stayed and became a national what?
National
Treasure.
treasure, yeah. I mean,
National what?
Treasure.
Treasure, yeah.
treasure. Well, here we are. This is 1913. The Smith Tower has not yet been finished, but photographer Frank Noel managed to cadge his way up to about the 35th floor. Not the observation deck that we've all been on, but he's about 35 floors up. And when he got up, he was greeted by a view of a skyline that no one had seen before except the workers on Smith Tower. So he whipped out, he had his camera out, and you can see that he was looking across at, there's St. James. Over here you've got Queen Anne and Queen Anne High School. And you can even see Lake Union, and there's Paul's Wallingford right up there, and Queen Anne, of course. Now down here,
Not for long.
down here, there's the Methodist Church with its beautiful dome, and right below that is the Rainier Club. So keep your eyes on the Rainier Club and the dome, and we're going to fast forward to today, and I didn't take it from the 35th floor, but I went to the observation deck, so it has a little bit more of an angle. Let's see what our change is now. There we go.
Now, Gene, are you going to tell them the story of that one in the middle, that odd-shaped?
Well, go ahead.
No, you tell them. You're the one who discovered it. Now,
This odd shape?
no, you have to go back to the modern one.
Oh, the modern.
The modern, this one, right there, the blue one.
Oh, yeah, we'll get to that. That's coming up. It's later in the show.
Okay.
Well, this is a famous picture of the foremaster of the Monongahela. And it's March 25th, 1931, just before they closed the Aurora Bridge, finished off the struts. And so they're towing the Monongahela, which had been sitting in Lake Union for several years. They towed it out from under, and it ended up off of Vancouver Island as a barge, as a logging company barge. So not a dignified ending for Monongahela, but this is one of those great photos that we keep encountering. Well, I went back to close to this location and shot the completed.
Isn't that pretty? That Gene has done such a marvelous job of sort of adamantly going back and back and back until he got the picture that he wants. So I would have never done that. But Gene does it, and hence we should thank him. So we all applaud Gene for his thank you.
So let's go up now. First, we're going to talk about this particular telegraph key. It's called the Taft Key, and it was given to President Taft in 1909 by George Carmack, who actually discovered the first gold in the Yukon. And he took a slab of Alaskan marble and he surrounded it with 22 nuggets from his original claim, and he gave it to the president. And in 1909, William Howard Taft used that key to open the Alaska-Yukon Pacific Exposition. So that was the signal that the exposition was open. Well, it was also used on February 22nd, 1932, about a year after the Monongahela went under. This is the top of the Aurora Bridge, and this is the day it was opened. The Aurora Bridge is also the George Washington Memorial Bridge, and 200 years after the birth of George Washington, the bridge was open on a Saturday. And far away in Washington, D.C., Herbert Hoover sat with the Taft Key, waiting till 2:57 in the afternoon Pacific time to press the key. And there were two ironies in this, associated with this ceremony. One was that the governor, Roland Hartley, who had been a steadfast opponent of the Aurora Bridge and all sort of interstate highways, and
he's a Republican.
And he was from Everett. Well, so Roland Hartley got up in front of this crowd after expressing long opposition to this bridge, and Aurora in particular, and Highway 99, and he stood up, and the blowhard that he was, he took great credit for the structure. Well, he was droning on, and the entire crowd was not on the bridge yet. There was thousands on one side and thousands on the other, and Hartley was yammering on, and at 2:57, Hoover pressed the key. And before Hartley could finish and take all the credit, the fireboats sent up their streamers, the flags unfurled, and with a great cheer, all the crowds emptied out onto the bridge and joined in the middle. So this is the wonderful moment when they all cascaded onto the bridge. And I think it's Clay's favorite photo in the book.
Absolutely.
Well, I went back with my 21-foot pole, which I used to get up to places where I can't get shy of having a drone or being significantly taller. And I stood on the edge and took that same view. Well, there's Hoover with the Taft Key opening the Aurora Bridge. Well, another president used it several times. And in 1962, it was used again to open the Seattle World's Fair, Century 21. Well, column that we had a great time working on was, and we have it in the book, and here's the pages from the book. A young girl named Paula Dahl was the 9 millionth visitor to the fair. And this was probably in the early fall of '62. And it turns out she's also a teacher at Issaquah Elementary, elementary in Issaquah, and she has the 9 million sign on her wall to show her students. Well, when she won the 9 millionth visitor, she was instant VIP. She was given this enormous dog. And you can see her happy parents, and I think they had a full day of complete and total access. They were treated like Elvis, the entire family. But behind her, you can see her very unhappy sister. Who was 9 millionth and one.
Is there a dimmer for these?
You know, can we dim these front lights here?
Sure, I didn't know Paul wanted to look at his notes though.
No, Paul has it all up here.
No, these are notes or something else.
Good, is that good?
Can you
Oh,
put
you
that
go
one
west.
on his back on?
Go
Yeah,
west.
we get really dark. if
That's
we do
good.
that.
Can't you turn that one up and put these on?
There you
You
go.
get more, beautiful.
That's better.
That works well.
You mean it took us that long to figure
Yeah.
that out?
No, we knew what we were doing. We
I
wanted
should have
to
asked
see
you
it.
to do.
Paul gives off his own light. That's what most people look at. It shines in the dark. Well, this is.
Are all the pictures you're showing us tonight in your book?
They are all in the book. Yeah. Yep. These are all directly from the book. And you'll see some modern photos that I've taken in the last, 1 or 2. I think Clay contributed one this afternoon. We'll get to it in just a minute or 2. This is the Seattle fire, and there were very few pictures of the fire as it was happening. So you see a lot of the aftermath, but not too many of the fire itself. And this is First and Spring, looking south towards Madison, where the fire began. Right up here, there's the Fry Opera House, and there I love this. You can just make out this figure standing up top there. Now, no one died in the fire, but it did consume 30 square blocks of downtown Seattle. And today, so all of these, there were a lot of photographers down in the area where the fire was, and many of them were grabbing their equipment and rushing away and saving their negs and saving their plates and their cameras. And there was one photographer who shot this picture, and he had several great photos of the fire, but that's why there's so few, is most people, including the photographers, were just rescuing what they had and carting it away in wagons. Well, I went back with my 21-foot pole, and this is about the same location. Now you can see the evidence of the big changes that happened post-fire, because we went from pretty much all wood to brick and mortar and stone.
You mentioned that no one was killed.
You want to grab your mic?
Oh, sorry. You mentioned that no one was killed. This morning's paper had an article about people who are now fostering rats as pets. And it turns out that rats are very intelligent and quite loving. Did you know that?
Yes.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
I know a lot of rats died.
a lot of rats died in that fire, they say. So that was then a tragedy because they have human qualities, right? So you can say no one died in that fire except, wait a second, rats died. And they feel things, they really feel things. And they're good sports about it, but they died. So there you go.
Then we could pause for a second.
The lesson here is to be kind to your pets, right? Stop beating your pets, okay?
Well, after the fire, we have a lot of examples of the ashes, or as this picture was titled in the paper, the hideous remains. This is on a rather, I think, probably a location that all of you will recognize when we go to our modern photo. So pay attention to this little frontispiece here, because that is the front.
It is still
There it is. Now, it's the front of the parking garage.
Not the
Not the Pioneer
Not the
Building.
Pioneer Building, but the one down a ways to the right. In other words, that one that's like that. Yeah.
And where the parking garage sits, this hotel, the Seattle Hotel, was built on the footprint of the hotel, the Occidental Hotel, which sat here before the fire. And the Seattle Hotel lasted until just before the World's Fair. And when it was removed, we ended up with our parking garage.
And the builders of it, there was a lot of complaints about getting rid of that hotel. So the builders said, well, we're sensitive people. We're going to design a building there that will repeat some of the architectural qualities of the neighborhood. And say they put these basket handle arches on the top. You can see those right up there. Can you see them? Well, you can barely see them, but they're still there. And those that was their answer. And you can see the basket handle windows across the way, across Yesler. Yeah. Yeah.
So it reveals a kind of sensitivity on the part of
Sensitivity,
parking garage creators.
Yes, it does, Gene.
Well, many of you might know of or recall or maybe even knew Victor Steinbrook, who was a leading Seattle architect. And when the Seattle Hotel was torn down, Victor commenced a movement in Seattle which led thousands of citizens to call for preservation of historical places. One of them was the Pike Place Market. And without Victor, which is why when you go to the market, you will see the Victor Steinbrook Park at the northern end of it. Because it was Victor who led the cry, save the market. Don't tear it down for developers. Don't replace the market with parking garages and condos. It's a treasure that we can't do without. And so if we look at this market in 1907, the first year it opened, and then we look at it today, it still has that sort of vibrant heart of Seattle. What would the city be without that? So we did sacrifice a beautiful hotel, but it was used to save the market. Okay, now we'll throw this to you. Where could this be? Where are we now? Any guesses?
Capitol Hill,
It's close.
down on the sort of the west bank of it.
No, that's exactly right, actually. Yeah.
You're pretty close.
But let's give us not simply a topographical description, but what is there now?
I-5.
Huh?
He got it. Speak up.
I-5.
Speak up.
I-5.
I-5. Let's look at it
You already
today.
said that? I complain. My wife has been complaining about my hearing too. Well, there you go. That proves it.
I came across that photograph by looking through archives. It wasn't from the book, but I've seen archives of
Well, you've already seen that photograph.
I've seen that photograph before in Seattle archives, historical archives, yeah.
What does Seattle Archives mean?
An online resource. I don't even know which one now, but just looking around.
Called Seattle Archives?
No, I don't know exactly which one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we did a story using it, so I know a lot of things that we do are kind of lifted, which is fine.
Gene,
Yeah.
can you go back? You should know that the book has the same then and the same now in both directions of I-5.
That's really lovely, isn't it?
Well, let's jump downtown. It's 1910, 1911. This is the federal building, the post office, built at the corner of 3rd and Union in 1908. And it lasted for 50 years. And in 58, they tore it down. Why did they tear it down, you ask? Why did they tear it down, Paul?
Well, you know the answer to that. Pigeon shit.
It's true. They had this beautiful sandstone, the beautiful steps. If you in any time in Seattle before 1958 said, meet me on the steps, everyone knew you were talking about those post office steps. It was a sort of middle ground in between public and private. And so you'd meet on the steps, you could see people doing it right in this photo. And but by the 50s, the powers that be looked at those steps and said, well, these are stained. They're covered with foul pigeon droppings.
Poop is the better word.
Poop, yeah. And the columns had pigeon droppings on them. So in their wisdom, they tore it down and they replaced it with a filing cabinet turned on its side.
Gene,
Yeah.
my wife and I were walking down there a few days ago,
Speak up.
and they have replaced this covering with this dark green corrugated effect. It makes it look even worse than this.
No kidding. When will those public servants ever get it straight? Go ahead, Gene.
Well, here we are looking at, and we all know what this is.
Who doesn't know what this is? Well, we can skip it.
Hooverville, there we go. So this is in the mid-30s. And in fact, the column Paul is working on now is about a fellow named Terry Pettis, who was, he joined the Communist Party in the late 30s and became an agitator and I think he moved into houseboats on Lake Union and started a houseboat association. But he was an activist in every sense, but he proclaimed, he said, when he went down to Hooverville in the mid-30s, and he arrived in town, I think, in the late 20s with his wife, when he went to Hooverville in the mid-30s, he said it was an example of the best community he had ever encountered, where people shared and they took care of each other. And so it's interesting that this place, which genuinely looks pretty misbegotten, was proclaimed by a number of people as a place of real community. Well, let's look at it today. Watch Smith Tower up here, and it will reappear in our modern photo. This is one of the ports of Seattle, and the manager of port let me get up onto a lift truck and go high enough in the air to get this photo, replicating a building, the B.F. Goodrich building, which no longer
I
exists.
think those trucks are fantastic. The way they continue that,
Yep.
I like that. Oh, this is a good one. You're gonna like this one.
It's good the lights are low.
Are the lights up?
Well, look up here, and I think some of you who,
Maybe somebody knows where this is, huh?
they might know where this is. There's a hint, this little building peeping over the, still exists. We can't see it in our now photo, so you have to look at it now, but those letters, F-R-E.
Huh? F-R-E.
Well, I had to go back to Fremont
Yeah, that's it.
and find a version of a modern version of this photo.
It's Fremont Baptist Church up there.
And that's Fremont Baptist Church. Well, this is photographed on a Tuesday afternoon, April 2nd, 1940, a year before the last trolley, this was removed off its tracks and replaced with an engine, a bus with an engine. And this was the final trolley that it ran for, I think, another year. And wasn't this picture taken by the motorman himself? Wasn't he a photographer?
But one of the motormen was an enthused photographer. Whether this was his picture, don't know. But you may know better than I, because you remember things that I wrote I don't remember.
Well, I went back, and there's a particular time of year when Fremont comes to a particular kind of life. So let's go take a look at this same corner, 34th and Fremont Avenue. So we did replace the trolley with a couple of women walking abreast.
So do you guys ever go to any of the Fremont fair, you know? It's
Paul.
fun.
Your mic,
What's that?
the mic.
Hi.
Well, they couldn't hear you.
All right. Gene?
Well, this is, over the years, Paul has defined, and I've taken on his definition because I'm a copycat. He's defined a particular category of photographs called ironic pictures. And they're ironic because there's, between the then and the now, there's no identifiable repetition. They're taken in pretty much the same spot, but this is one of the classic ironic photos because it is of a Post-Intelligencer article, which came out in September 9, 1906, and it's an excursion down from Lake Washington along the Black River. And when Lake Washington was lowered, the Black River disappeared because Lake Washington went down 9 feet. And so the rivers that drained Lake Washington, several vanished. And one of them was the Black River. And it completely, it used to go all the way to the Sound. And I think this excursion, weren't they trying to get to the Sound? They were trying to make...
They were out for having a good afternoon.
They were just having a good
They were just
day.
going to paddle down the Black River, then take it as far as the intersection where the White River and sorry. It was kind of a romance, It was couples, and they got a few canoes, and they went down the Black River, and where it then met the White River and became the Duwamish River, and there's still a little bit of puddle of the Black River there, but that's about it. And they meant to get to the Elliott Bay, but they didn't get there before sundown. So they had to get out of their boats and walk through a farmer's field and knock on his door. So that was it.
Oh, good. Well, let's look at this spot today, and you can see why we call it our pure ironic example here. Now that's Carl from the Black Bear Car Wash. And the car wash is over my left shoulder. And Carl handily posed next to the Bears and McDonald's. And the Black River once ran along Rainier Avenue, what is now Rainier Avenue.
Yeah. What are the Bears doing there, do you know?
I think they're just the emblem of the Black Bear Car Wash.
Oh, I saw it. I forgot the name, yeah. Well, that helps. Okay.
Well, these are the two faces that launched 10,000 books.
Really? The Brown kids, brother and daughter of a photographer who left a lot of negatives, which are now going to wind up in the Seattle Public Library because I'm giving my archive to the library. So they're getting thousands of images that I've collected over 50 years, including this collection. And he turned out to be a detective for the Seattle Police Department. I don't know what became of her, I'm sorry. Anyway, so this is looking, where is this, you guys? Who wants to suggest where this is? This is on the cover of
Cedar
the...
shake plant on the canal.
Speak up.
Could that be the cedar plant that produced shingles on the, it was along the Ship Canal?
It isn't, but you're right about all the shingle plants that were in mostly Ballard.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Now, this
Before
is
the locks going out to the sound.
These were connected, because this is on Lake Union. This is the southeast corner of Lake Union. So you're looking across, in the distance is Capitol Hill, and then there's the Western Lumber Mill at the south end of the lake, and that was very important after the fire of 1889. It supplied a lot of the lumber for rebuilding the city, you know, the lumber parts of it. And it's as old as 1884. And David Denny, one of the Denny's, that was his mill, started out to be his mill. So that's where we are. And those are the Brown kids.
There's one other aspect of this which will give you a sense and will lead into our now photo, in that this particular structure here is an elevated roadway. And that's actually, most people would say, well, that must be Eastlake, since we are looking to the east.
Yeah.
But in fact, we're standing in a little cove that no longer exists. And this is Westlake.
And that is Westlake, it really is. That's shooting straight. That's where Westlake was a timber trestle, which became, it became the road.
Well, let's take a quick look at it today.
Isn't that amazing?
Because you'll see why that's Westlake. Because today, we're several blocks back. There's no water. The lake is a few blocks behind these gals, who are the children of my neighbors. And I took this photo in 2011 for a show that Paul and I did at the old Mohi. And I went back last year with the same girls. I thought this would be a nice now and then. So we're going to see these girls all, well,
what are their names?
It's, here we have Tia on the left and Liana, her little sister, on the right. And today, Tia is a Roosevelt Rough Rider. She's also a driver, which is terrifying.
Oh, and Leanna's really grown up. Okay, guys. You know what this is, of course. Where is it?
Gone.
Huh?
It was a cannery for a while.
Yes, but where is it here?
Where are we
Thought it
here?
was took home.
What are we looking at right now? You got it.
Yeah, quite, yeah.
Well, it was brought to the sound in '35, introduced to, and I think it, in Paul's original column, which is, it's great to turn to his original materials because
You can trust him. Oh, you can trust him.
I trust him every time. But in his original column, he mentions that it arrived in '35 just in time to lift Seattleites from their depression, because it was such a delight. Now, I love this photo because it was actually taken in '48. But look at the numbers of people crowded on the decks. It's obviously going from Lake Union through the locks out to the Sound, where it plied its routes until the mid-'60s. So you can see it's being towed with the windows filled with passengers and the upper deck filled with passengers and up in the wheelhouse. Now, Clay is going to. This is where
This
Clay
is the real highlight of the entire lecture. This is the treat. Clay?
Well, how many of you have been on the Kalakala? I know there are people who are. I was fortunate to go on it during its last month in June of 1967 when my high school stage band went to the Olympic College Stage Band Festival in Bremerton. And how many of you remember what it sounded like and felt like on the boat? Those of you who, yeah. It was a sensory experience to the extreme because by that time it was decrepit. You couldn't get to the upper floors. They'd closed them off. There were spider webs everywhere. And when the motor started, you could feel it in your bones. It went wah, 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 and the sides of the ferry literally vibrated. It was a true experience.
Now, I had a number of people who asked the question, how many of them wrote it and knew about the sound, and they said yes, but you didn't ask them to make the sound.
Well, you could ask them to replicate it. We could do it.
All right, let's hear anybody here that disagrees or agrees with Clay's imitation of the colloquial. You are now welcome to give your version. Please stand, though, while you're doing it. Sir, you want to do?
Like writing in a garbage can.
What was it?
Like writing in a garbage can.
Like writing a garbage can.
Metal garbage.
Very good.
That's a great analogy.
That's a description of it. Anyone else? That'll do it, I guess.
That is great. That's absolutely
Again, I had to go back to the locks and find something that would stand in for the colloquial. And so I called up and discovered that there was a ship in Lake Union that was being repaired, and went down early one morning in February of 2017 and found the USS Turner Joy. And only after I took this photo did I come to realize that the Turner Joy was the second destroyer in the Gulf of Tonkin. It came to the aid of the USS Maddox and participated in the misbegotten process of getting us into the Vietnam War.
And here's the communists again. Here they are again.
So the Turner Joy is a Bremerton Museum ship, and it was being restored and painted and debarnacled. There it is off the coast of Vietnam.
Over there, the Turner Joy?
It still is, yeah. So here it is off the coast of Vietnam. Now Clay is a West Seattleite and proud of it. And down below Salty's,
Too proud of it.
and down below Salty's restaurant, the last remnants of the colloquial are perched. And here is, remember the wheelhouse? Yeah. This is it. And so
when you love something, you got to just put up with the infirmity. This is sort of the story of marriage here.
So here it is, looking back, as I'm sure the captains over the years saw it, at the skyline through the interior
That's lovely.
of the colloquial.
That's
Thank
pretty
you,
nice.
Clay.
And you can go do that yourself. Just go to Salty's. It's sitting out in the parking lot 24/7.
What does PSM stand for?
Have no idea.
No.
Puget Sound something.
Huh. Okay.
Well, now we're getting to the building that Paul loves. This was taken
Oh, I forgot about that.
a couple of days before the viaduct opened, just before they let cars out. So it was in April of '53, and we had these wonderful gals in glorious red coats with Smith Tower on a perfect day. And I took the final photo, the final repeat of this photo, which I'd taken a couple times before, again in 2017 in early summer. And here's my version. You notice the red car. That's a point of pride.
How many times did you go on before the red car came along?
I think it was 5 or 6 circuits
Wow.
before I tailed a red car. Now, up here, this is the building that Paul and actually really enjoy.
We adore it, don't we?
We do adore it.
Yeah. Clay, let's see whether Clay is loyal to our trio.
Oh,
Clay,
sure.
what do you think of it?
Oh, it's beautiful. It's
Okay,
it's
there you
unusual.
have
It's a
all of us.
lovely building.
Whale
We'll talk
units
about that
are-
in a second, but
Yeah.
as promised, a couple weeks ago, just before they took it down, very close to this spot, only a few hundred yards from where we are right now. And there it is. This is the last remnant, the last section of the viaduct in the south. There's a
That's
little bit more left
That
in
is
the north.
really lovely, Clay. Look at that. Look at, you have those yellow, those
The
must be
stacks.
new stacks that go to the ferry. The new building for the ferry, right?
No, those are the ventilation stacks for the tunnel.
Right.
Well, maybe they can also help the ferry.
Help the ferry? Well, possible.
We've got those sticking right up next to the new senior housing that I'm moving into at the market.
Right, well, yours are the north end.
Yeah, mine are better.
So this is the very last appearance. Now that original photo, the one we just saw, this one here, was taken right beyond the bend of this building. So if you were going up the viaduct, you can see the pathway. And then just coming around the edge of this building,
Okay.
that's where the original view was, which we can't get anymore.
Well, listen, we have a real good opportunity here to really affect the ethical life and light of one of us, and that is Clay. Clay was for a long time the promoter of the viaduct, and he'd say it was because it was such a great view, but the truth is, more importantly, it was the way that people from West Seattle got to Seattle, and West Seattle was always on his mind. And since the destruction of that, Clay, what do you think now, the waterfront now?
The jury is still out. I still miss the view.
You see, there he is. He's got a beautiful view now. He can walk down. He doesn't have to smell the carbons. Doesn't have to listen to all the running of rubber on rubber and all of that. And he's still holding up. But I think we're going to get him eventually. Okay.
Well, now we're going to go to the building that the three of us really adore. And it was built right hovering over the old Methodist church with its dome. The Rainier Club is just down below to the west. And this is the F5 building, also called the Mark. It was built by architect, designer, developer Kevin Daniels, and he commissioned it from ZGF Architects with the instruction that he wanted it to embody the attributes of his favorite actress. He wanted poise, sophistication, and beauty.
Slender.
And yeah, so look at the lines of this building, and now we're going to look at the photograph that while the building was going up, that Daniels placed in the lobby for his workers to pass by every day. So it's, and look at the cant of her hips and the shoulders and her little cigarette holder and then back.
Yeah,
You can see.
it works. All right, that's a wonderful revelation.
Well, we're closing in on the end here, and we're pausing now at what is today a unique structure, because it's this old building. This photo was taken in the 90s. Is Seattle's oldest structure, and we're looking at these folks on the porch here. First of all, it was built in West Seattle in the early 1860s as a replacement of Doc Maynard's house, West Seattle abode, that burned down, and then he replaced it with this house. And it was sold to someone that Paul, the family of someone that Paul has been studying and actually knew. You want to tell us about this, Paul?
Well, yes, this is the picture I got out of Ivor Haglund's drawer in his office at the pier. He pulled it out and showed it to me. And that is his mother standing in the white dress next to her mother, Hanson, Mrs. Hanson, and her father is in the dark coat, and then some other members of the family. So this was posed by that family. And that,
And this is the Hanson family?
Hansons, yes, yeah.
I think this is young Torvald Hanson peeing on the side of the house.
Well, I don't know, it's Torvald, I think his name was, no, maybe it was Torvald. But anyway, that is it. And they later moved this from the waterfront to where it is now, which is a long, long walk south of the waterfront, and it's still there.
And here it is a couple years ago, and you can actually see Clay, who was the director of the Southwest Seattle Historical Society, with a number of members of the society. Well, Clay went back today, and the folks who have moved into this house have actually done it proud, because it's the same it is the oldest structure in Seattle, and it sits about a block away from Alki Boulevard, and now we're going to look at it. Clay's photo today.
Oh, very nice, yeah. Very nice.
Didn't they do a beautiful job?
They did a
Someone
good
finally
job. The pink
did
is
Doc
nice,
Maynard
too.
proud.
The pink is nice, pink paint. And yeah, that's very nice. Did they have a plaque up at all?
There is no plaque.
The plaque is in the ground a block away on Alki Beach.
Well, they can have two plaques.
There should be some kind of plaque up. But we're going to jump now to our last couple of slides. This is Princess Angeline. And
who's she?
Who is Princess Angeline? She's the daughter of Chief Seattle. And she lived on the streets of Seattle, and then was given a shelter, a small house down below Western. And there was some mystery as to exactly where that place was. And Ron Edge and Paul worked out pretty much by triangulating a series of structures and stumps and overhangs and eaves. They worked out just about the exact spot where Princess Angeline is sitting on her porch. And we sent Ron down to the same spot, and to our surprise, Ron and I were walking around down below the market, and we found, and we looked down, and he said, "It's in the open air." And so we went to this little alley right down below the market, and these are bamboo trees going up towards Western. And he's sitting, there's the Pike Place parking garage up here. This is the Fixed Medor apartment building right here. And Ron is sitting about the same spot, he estimates, where Princess Angeline sat.
You know the steps that go down from the market to the waterfront?
The Pike.
So they're
Pike
just
steps.
on the other side of the Fixed Medor building, on that side.
And you can go see it. This is fenced off. The photo doesn't indicate that, but you can't walk in here. But if you, has any of you gone to Lowell's in the market, the restaurant?
Yeah.
Go up to the second floor, look out the window straight down, and you see it.
Is that a waterfall there that comes down towards the chair?
It's not, it's just one of those steep hills that the settlers, when they first arrived, found all along the waterfront in Seattle, which made the waterfront so daunting. Not a waterfall, this is just stepped stone.
There's
But
what looks like a stream diagonally from the
That's
center.
light, that's light.
yeah, it's just a light. It's just light coming
I don't
down.
see your stream, where is it?
It's just a light.
Kind of next on Ron's
From the
left.
chair up to the,
It's just a light.
Yeah, it's just the light coming down. Oh, you mean the little,
two chairs.
these chairs here?
yeah.
Oh, I see your stream, yeah. Yeah, good.
It might
Comes out
be a
of the rock
stream in
there.
midwinter, but not
So
when we
it's all
took this
in my
photo.
mind.
You're not nuts, it just, that's the way the light is at that point. Who's this, you guys?
Well, we do have Princess Angeline, whose given name was Kiki Soblu, and her father, Chief Seattle. And we inset this photo of Chief Seattle and Princess Angeline sitting in a very particular location. She would pose for visiting photographers. This is early 1890s. And photographer unknown, but it's really a spectacular photo. And we found, this is in the book, we actually went to the same spot with the direct descendants of both Princess Angeline and Chief Seattle. This is Mary Lou Slaughter, who is the great-great-great-great-granddaughter of Princess Angeline, and this is Ken Workman, who's the great-great-great-great-grandson of Chief Seattle.
They all look like they're from Central Cast.
They do. They're so beautiful.
They're just beautiful.
But Mary Lou is also one of the premier basket weavers in Washington State, and particularly they're both Duwamish. And in fact, if you go to the Duwamish Lodge down in West Seattle, the entire floor design, the inlaid parquet floor, is based on Mary Lou's baskets. So it's quite lovely. But so while we were there, and they came down and posed side by side, and while we were there, Ken Clay took this photo of me taking a picture of the two of them. And while we're there, Ken whipped around a couple of times. And afterwards, we all sat down at Ivar's, and we asked him, well, what was the matter, Kent? And he said, well, someone was tapping me on the elbow. And
I don't approve of that.
I know, Paul does not approve of any tapping on the elbow, but we never saw anyone approach Ken in Post Alley near the market. But it strikes me that these are the moments, for me, these moments arrive when I'm warming myself at the historical fires of Paul's prose. And they also arrive when something locks into place in a photograph. That, to me, is the little tap of history, when everything kind of falls into place and you know you're at that spot. So.
Okay, guys, let's give.
That's it. Thank you so much. And we did bring
everybody's going to buy a book.
a bunch of books. And yes.
Are there more pictures in the book than you've shown us?
Oh, I've only showed you about 25 comparisons, and there's another 80 in the book, 90.
Some people are trying to escape.
What we're going to do, hold your horses for just a moment.
I can't do that.
I'm going to wheel the table up front, and then you can come and buy books and have both Paul and Jean inscribe them personally for you.
We got to send our kids to college.
So I'll be right along with the book table. The books are a total of $55, including sales tax.
You take credit card?
And we take
it
cash, checks, credit card. Yes.
The credit card means you can also get two books, one for your cousin in Peoria. Right? All right, we have another announcement.
We have another announcement. You're not done with me yet. So thank you to Jean and Paul for and Clay for their wonderful presentation tonight. Thank you all for coming. And if you enjoyed this, please join us on October 12th. It's coming up at the end of the week here at the Society's next Saturday speaker program at the Redmond Public Library, Redmond Public Safety Building. And the presentation will be Steve Williams talking about the history of coal mining on Cougar Mountain. Thank you.
You know him, don't you, Steve?
Yeah.